there's all these funny videos right now of men saying the way to turn my wife on is like to do the laundry and to wash the dishes and to change the diapers. It's actually true. Not that she's turned on by it necessarily, but that not doing those things is a barrier to her being able to be open to you in that way. So women need this really safe container. So a huge part of keeping intimacy alive with your partner is helping create the container where baby is handled, house is handled, that the all the external stuff is finished, that it's quiet, that it's safe. Every couple has to work this out. But the more you as a dad can help create this container, like create this space that she feels safe in, the more likely she is to be able to open up. You are listening to Dedicated Joe, the new dad's guide on the upending and transformational experience of becoming a father. Hi, y'all. Today I'm going to talk about how to maintain your relationship with your partner post-baby. This was something Serenity and I have put a lot of work into, had a lot of different struggles, and have a really pretty great relationship. So I feel pretty qualified to share on this one. It's still a work in progress, but something that I feel is really, really key and maybe underestimated when you have a baby. So first of all, relationships are hard anyway, right? There's nobody in an intimate relationship, especially people who are married, that don't have challenges. So it's already hard. You add a baby in there and it's just like infinitely harder. So there's going to be challenges. There's no way around that. Now, 90% of the battle is prioritizing the relationship, is just deciding that despite the challenges, despite all the extra work, everything going on, my relationship with my partner is critical and I need to maintain that. So that you're here listening to this, good news, you're 90% of the way there. That you care and you think about it is huge. So beyond that, there's some tips and tricks that I want to share of ways that you can really maybe make it easier or really like have a playbook to play by so that you know that you're doing the best you can to maintain that core relationship. So first of all, prioritizing it means creating time for it, right? Time, energy, planning, showing that you want to do that. This in the beginning stages of baby can be very short, right? This could be 5 minutes. Baby's asleep. You take a moment. You ask for connection. You tell her, hey, I want to connect with you. Hey, I want to spend some time with you. You will just be present with her. You can snuggle. You can ask her how she's feeling. You can, talk about a TV show she's watching, whatever it is. There's just like, making it clear that you have attention for her and you're not just there to like get everything done and serve her. Serving her is a key role we play as dads, and we must continue to do that, and serving baby. But like she just wants to feel you too. She wants your attention. And so making it clear that she is still a priority to you, even if it's short. Serenity and I still snuggle before bed every night. We often actually sleep apart. We go to bed at different times. When Della wasn't sleeping through the night, we often traded nights. So she would take baby one night, I would take baby Nate. We were both working full time. So at least one of us would get full night's sleep, but we never got to sleep together. So what we do is snuggle before bed with whoever was going to bed first, usually her. I would snuggle her for 5 or 10 minutes and then kind of put her to bed. And that was a ritual that we've really maintained even as we sleep apart to this day. And then date nights. Date nights critical, must be held, and I recommend men hold it as a important thing that we can do to show that we value our wife and we value the relationship. We can hold the date card and just make sure that we have dates. Serenity and I still to this day try to have a weekly date. Is it weekly? No. But because we try to have it weekly, we at least have it 2 or 3 times a month. I know couples who do it once a month and they seem okay. So it seems like weekly's ideal, once a month at the very least, but you got to do it. When you early time with baby, this could be, baby's napping, baby goes to bed, you have, 1 hour date together in the house. But I really recommend getting babysitters. I am very surprised at how many people I meet with a 1-year-old or an 18-month-old that have never gotten a babysitter. They've never left the baby with someone else. And that is like really important for your own sanity. It's good for baby too, to be left with other people. There's a lot of data on that, but it's really important for your relationship, for your sanity to get out of the house together. I remember Serenity and I's first date, Della was 3 weeks old and we had a postpartum doula watch the baby, and we went and got ice cream and then went to the grocery store. That was our first date. But it was very special, and we continue to do that, and I do my best to prioritize that and schedule babysitters and find places for us to go and fun things for us to do. On the date, we try not to talk about business. Now, we run an actual business together, so we try not to talk about that business. But we also try not to talk too much about the house business. There's a lot of business of the house, business of the baby. So we try to really focus on talking about each other. We can talk about Della, fun, playful moments, memories, things we were enjoying about her, but not like, how is her teeth brushing regimen going, or what is the plan for potty training. We try to keep that to our business meetings, which are another thing I really, really recommend. And again, in the first 3 to 6 weeks after baby, maybe none of this will work, but pretty soon, I recommend getting into a weekly business meeting where you sit down and talk about the business of the household. And this is critical to spend structured time talking about the business of the household so that it doesn't fall on either one of you disproportionately, especially her. But also it makes it so that when you do have time one-on-one together, you can talk about each other and you're not like trying to always manage all the decision-making businesses over dinner or on your date. Now, another critical thing about maintaining a relationship post-baby is the fair play system of household management. One of the biggest challenges to married couples is an inequity in household management and chores and running the household. Unfortunately, this still overwhelmingly falls to women, even in households where they both work full time. Women do a hugely disproportionate amount of this work, not only the physical work and the labor, but also the mental labor of thinking about it, planning it, holding this domain. And so I have a whole nother video on the fair play system and how to implement this, but it's critical to your relationship with your partner that she feels that you are fully showing up in the household. Otherwise, she carries that resentment. It gets in the way of your connection, of your relationship, and builds resentment in her mind. She might then start complaining or nagging at you, which men hate being nagged. And so this is like one of those things that really kills intimate relationships, is an inequity in chores and household management. So using the fair play system is a great way to do that. But in any way that you can continually show up in the household will help your relationship. Same thing goes for your own self-care, right? If you and her aren't taking care of yourselves and having alone time and doing those self-care things, you're not going to be able to show up for each other. So really, even though it's counterintuitive to think, oh, taking a walk or taking time to go to the gym is taking me away from her, away from the household, it is actually good for your relationship to do that because you fill yourself up and you can fill her up. So now we can't talk about relationships without talking about sex. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about sex. I could do a whole video or series of videos on sex after baby or marital sex. But I'll say the few kind of key points with how Serenity and I maintain this, which again is really good, but is a challenge. It's something that takes constant effort. First of all, the fair play system, critical for her to feel able to settle her nervous system. Women need to feel safe and held. And if there's undone laundry and there's dishes in the sink and she doesn't feel like you have been showing up to help with the household and there's work to be done, she's not only going to feel unable to relax enough because there's work to do, but also have that resentment at you. There's all these funny videos right now of men saying, the way to turn my wife on is like to do the laundry and to wash the dishes and to change the diapers. It's actually true. Not that she's turned on by it necessarily, but that not doing those things is a barrier to her being able to be open to you in that way. So women need this really safe container. So a huge part of keeping intimacy alive with your partner is helping create the container where baby is handled, house is handled, that all the external stuff is finished, that it's quiet, that it's safe, that you're alone. It can be very hard to do with the baby, right? And so whether you have to leave the house and do this outside the house in some way, or whether you have somebody take the baby out of the house, or you negotiate a way with your wife to feel safe with the baby sleeping or a toddler watching TV or something. It's every couple has to work this out. But the more you as a dad can help create this container, like create this space that she feels safe in, the more likely she is to be able to open up. And then, so one way to do that is to schedule it. Serenity and I have played around with scheduling our intimate time throughout our relationship. Sometimes we're on it, sometimes we get off of it, but for a lot of periods of time, that was the way we made sure we did it. We tried to do it again once a week. Sometimes it wasn't quite once a week, but at least we tried to do it once a week. And it's something as a man I can do. I can hold that schedule and I can make sure there's childcare handled and that there's a safe, clean space. But scheduling is great, but one thing I had to learn really the hard way over and over again was I can't do all that, create the safe space, show up at the time that it's time, and just expect her to be ready to go. Right? Like women still need to be turned on. They need to be seduced, right? There needs to be some energy. And that starts before the schedule, right? It starts over text message before that day. It starts with, like I said, cleaning the house and being helpful around the house. And then of course, knowing what she likes, what turns her on, be prepared to do that. There's some work involved for us to help transition our partner from mom or employee or all these other identities into our wife, into our partner in this way. And though sometimes I get really frustrated that she can't just flip the switch and just become my wife again, that I have to be the one to do the work. And why isn't she doing this work for me? Why isn't she turning me on? Why isn't she organizing now so I can get turned on, right? Like I get resentful about that sometimes. But ultimately, it's a powerful position to be able to turn her on, to help her move into that space. I know exactly what it takes to do it. And if you don't, that's something you want to learn is what your wife wants. But most men know. And so I know how to do it and I can do it. And then we have a, really fulfilling interaction, both in that bedroom moment as well as throughout our relationship. And that's a power I have. So even though I get resentful about that, I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I would much rather have that than be waiting around on her to create that for me. I create it for her and we benefit from that. But ultimately, I am also surprised at how few couples talk about sex. It's something that must be talked about, as much as you can, whether it's in the business meetings, whether it's on dates. Once you get into the bedroom and it's time, it's pretty hard to talk about without it being kind of a turn off. So you ideally understand what she likes and what she needs. Of course, in the moment you talk about it too, what you want and what the desire is there. So it's just like a constant thing to learn to talk about. And if you didn't talk about it before, it's harder, but now you got to talk about it now. Like it's not just going to happen. And that can lead to a lot of resentment if one partner has the expectation and then it's not clear and then the other doesn't know. And then there's the rejection and all that. Gotta have really clear communication there. So ask for help, man. There's like any hard thing you do, you can't do it alone. You need coaches, any star player needs a coach, any person who's sick needs a doctor, right? And so in this way we have traumas and mental emotional baggage that get in the way of our relationships that therapists can help with. It's a skill, it's an art form, relating in general, but especially after baby, that is a sport that we want to get better at. So coaches are great. Serenity and I have had a relationship coach for I think 8 years now. We've had a relationship coach and it is critical. We would not have made it without that coach. I tell you very clearly that we reach more than one breaking point in our relationship, at least 2 different times that I think without his support, we would have probably not made it. We would have been one time before we had the baby, and then since and after the baby as well. Actually, just in the last year, we went through a lot of struggles that he really helped us get through, and like came out of it way stronger. Like I'm really glad we had that. I'm glad that we stuck through it, obviously, but it was very critical. Coaches, therapists, even just friends, bringing in other people to talk. If you have the same fight, right? If you're fighting about the same thing, which most couples do, have the same fights over and over, bring in a third party for that. Ideally a professional, but even a friend to say, hey, we're having the same fight. What do you think? Get their position on it. And, just remembering that asking for help is not failure. It can feel embarrassing to have to ask for support with your relationship, but it is critical. And everybody knows it's hard. Everybody knows you need help and everybody's happy to help. Your friends are happy to help you. They love you both and they want to help however they can. So overall, first of all, prioritizing it, making sure it's in your mind all the time, creating the safe space container for it, right? Holding that, keeping your share of the household handled so she feels that equal partner, prioritizing your own self-care, taking charge of creating that way to maintain the sexual intimacy, keeping it simple if necessary, having date nights, and really just being there. I will say, as a man, sometimes it's hard for me to just be there with my wife. Like on date night, when we can't talk about work, it's like, what do we talk about then? And she said, you know what you can always do? You can always ask me how I'm feeling. When in doubt, ask her how she's feeling and go from there. She will tell you something and then that will lead to something else. When in doubt, ask her how she's feeling, and you can never go wrong with just putting a little attention on her. Goes such a long way. Call to action, challenges to do one of these things this week. Put some attention on your partner this week. Create some space for connection with your partner this week, and figure out how that works for you and your partner. And be great moms and dads. Be great husbands and wives. Be great men and women. And stay dedicated.